Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott. You know him as B. Scott. The madness is over. The NCAA tournament for both the men's and women's tournament has concluded. But we've got a lot of questions that we're going to answer today as we kind of do a debrief. We have kind of a hodgepodge of different topics we want to talk about as the season has wrapped up. We want to talk about Purdue. Obviously, their run, to the national championship game ends with their game against UConn on Monday night. We'll take you through that. Was this the best shot they had to win a banner? We're also going to talk about some women's basketball. Is Caitlin Clark the GOAT of women's college basketball? We'll dive into that. Was this the best year when it comes to basketball as a whole in the state of Indiana? Because it was, you kind of going back through the years, I'm interested to get into that a little bit later, because going back through the years, it is kind of interesting kind of what happened in what years, and there are some banner years, and one that was eerily similar to this year as far as what happened in the different levels of college basketball and the different levels of basketball as a whole. And then, of course, we'll wrap it up with what impact we think Caitlin Clark will have on the Fever, as, of course, the Indiana Fever are looking, they have the number one pick, and Caitlin Clark is lined up to be the number one overall pick there. So a lot to cover, B. Scott. But yeah, Purdue, that's going to be topic number one today as hey, we were talking about it. It was a great run to the Final Four. It just stinks that it ends the way that it does, but they run into what was an amazing team in UConn.
Generational team in UConn. I mean, like I was telling you earlier, there is no shame in losing in the national championship game to UConn. UConn was on an absolute heater. This was a buzzsaw of a team. I mean, people are already talking about, is this one of the greatest college basketball teams of all time when in regards to UConn? And Purdue quieted a lot of people. They put an end to a lot of the jokes. They got that monkey off their back of finally getting to the Final Four. There still hasn't been a program national championship, but look, Purdue just needs a year that they can make the Final Four in the national and make a run to the national championship where there's not a generational team they're playing against. Last time they played in the national championship, it was 1969, and they lost to John Wooden's UCLA squad led by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It was like the first of a huge streak of national championships for UCLA. So it's like another generational type team there. So, but hey, you know what? Definitely proud of that team. Just laser focused all year. I don't think you'll ever see a team again that after winning their national semifinal game is just kind of like, yay, when they advance their name on the bracket to the national championship. It's just, that team was on a mission, and, it happens. You run into a team like that. It is what it is. So like I said, there's no shame whatsoever. Nobody's hanging their heads as a Boilermaker fan today. Yeah, it stung. That to know you were 40 minutes away from a national championship and UConn was what was standing in the way. But otherwise, I went into that game just going, no matter what happens, this team was awesome and it was a fun ride.
Yeah, I mean, part of that conversation, you mentioned what we talked about a little bit before we hit record, and part of that conversation on my end was, I know it's a little bit different, but, I felt the same way about last night as I did. I don't leave that game with a bad taste in my mouth. I mean, similar runs for Indiana teams going to the, national championship game, like the two ones that Butler made, like when Gordon Hayward misses that shot, it was a great run, but still left a bad taste in my mouth. When they lost to UConn a few years later, like left a bad taste in my mouth. Oh yeah, it was the following year. Yeah, they lost, left a bad taste in my mouth.
Left a bad taste in your mouth because that was just a no-show.
Yeah, they just didn't play well at all.
No-show that game. But you know what? What's great about this Purdue team though is this is just the beginning. everybody's like, well, now Purdue's going to fall off the map because they lost Zach Edey. It's like, well, hate to break it to you, but the players Purdue is bringing in next year are phenomenal. And guess what? One of them's 7'2", and
Yeah.
there's already another 7'2" center on the roster.
And
So it's just, the Giants just keep coming. And also, it's like, look, there's some heritage that's coming in. You have Glenn Robinson's son coming in. You have Tamika Catching's nephew coming in, who's one of the top rated players in the country. This team is going to get athletically better. And like having athletes like that is what Purdue was missing last night in the end. I mean, obviously you saw a glimpse of what Purdue can be athletically when Cam Heide put his name out there on the map of a high flyer when he just kind of came out of nowhere for that putback dunk. But as Purdue fans, we're like, yep, that's Cam Heide. That's what he does. And everyone else was like, oh my gosh, where did that white boy from Minnesota come from? And it's just like, well, yeah. I mean, hey, last week on the podcast, I picked Cam Heide as a player we would be talking about. Yeah, he didn't have a great Final Four national championship game, but he left a lasting impression.
Yeah, I was gonna say he had a moment that people are gonna be talking about. And I mean, look, maybe Robbie Avila, he's gonna be available. Would they have a room for him? I don't know.
No, actually, Purdue is right now one over. They actually are needing somebody to either go off scholarship or transfer. They have oversigned. But it's already Robbie Avila is already basically committed to St. Louis.
I was gonna say I know that a lot of them have already moved on.
It's already been reported he's following his coach to St. Louis. So
yeah,
not surprised. Because honestly, like everybody's like, oh yeah, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar coming to the Big Ten. It's like I don't think he could hang in the Big Ten. He's good, but
I mean, it's one of those things where you'd have to go to the right team.
One thing to be good in the Missouri Valley, and there's another thing to be good in the Big Ten.
I mean, Lance Jones, anyone?
Well,
he was good in the Missouri Valley. He came to the Big Ten.
I'm talking about like a guard, an athletic guard compared to a
right. I know.
Center. I mean, okay, I guess you could say DJ Burns at NC State, but look how that ended.
But yeah, no, talking about, just the feeling about Purdue, part of that conversation, like I said earlier, was just the fact that, like, I'm coming away from that the way I felt like I felt after the Big Ten championship, when Purdue played Michigan in football, where I was like, I wasn't necessarily like, I thought they could. I thought there was a chance. Obviously, there was more of a chance for Purdue basketball to, beat UConn than there was for Purdue football to beat Michigan. But at the same time, still cool to see him there. Still cool. I know there's probably an IU fan watching this video like, oh yeah, you think it's cool? Your team didn't even hang a banner.
Look at all of our dusty banners. I wasn't even alive for the last one.
Right, but I mean, it was still cool to like see Purdue be on the map and have all that hype around them. But that's not the end of our Purdue conversation, because in case you missed it, we're gonna get ready to dive into it a little bit more here. Looking back at the Final Four weekend. Number 1 Purdue against number 1 NC State, or number 11 NC State. That's where it all kicked off. Purdue won that one, obviously 63-50. Zach Edey scores 20 points, grabs 12 boards in the win. Lance Jones had 14 points. He was 4 of 9 from beyond the arc. Then number 1 UConn beats number 4 Alabama 86-72. Donovan Clingan has an 18.5 rebound, 4 block night. Stephon Castle was the leading scorer with 21 points and 5 rebounds of his own, which set up Monday night's national championship game of number 1 UConn versus number 1 Purdue. And UConn led 36-30 at halftime. It felt like Purdue was in that one. It was back and forth. Purdue fighting their way out. They would get kind of a little bit behind, and then they would fight their way back, kind of, take a little bit of a lead, then fall behind again. But they were in it at that point in time. But then really from halftime on, UConn kept Purdue at arm's length, and really never looked back and started to pull away a bit. And basically, at the end of the day, the Huskies were hitting their shots and getting second chances when they weren't. And it was the opposite for Purdue. Whenever Purdue missed a shot, UConn was right there getting the rebounds. There were a few possessions where like UConn would miss a shot, they would get their rebound, and they would shoot it. They would shoot another shot, Miss get the rebound again. And I was like, my hope was dwindling with each rebound. I was like, come on, can we just get the ball back, please? Come on. UConn led by as many as 18 points in the second half. The final score: UConn 75, Purdue 60. Tristan Newton led the charge for Connecticut with 20 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds. Zach Edey had 37 points, 10 rebounds in his final game for the Boilers. So one thing I like to do, we do this some during the month of May for IndyCar. We've done it a couple other times, but I thought it might be fun to give kind of a fake award at the end of the season. Not a real one. We're not picking an MVP. We're not picking any sort of thing. Just kind of a fun made up award to give to a Purdue player as the season's over, to kind of wrap up everything. And my season ending award after this tournament run is I'm going to give out the Lance Make 'em Dance award. It was an unceremonious end to his run with the Boilermakers. 5 points, 3 rebounds in the Natty. He was in foul trouble most of the night. But the Southern Illinois transfer, Lance Jones, talked about him a little bit earlier. He was a big difference maker for this team this year. 12 points per game, which was third on the team. Led the team in 3-pointers, 4 trays in the Final Four win over NC State, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. To come from a mid-major school and not only make an impact for a Big Ten school, but propel one of the best Big Ten programs to its first Final Four in 40 years, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty amazing. Of course, goes viral as well with the dance he does as well. So, I mean, there must just be something about guys named Lance making differences for Indiana teams. You got Lance Stevenson for the Pacers back in the day, and now you've got Lance Jones for the Purdue Boilermakers. So the Lance Make 'em Dance award obviously fittingly goes to Lance Jones. What a great season for him. With all these guys playing 8 years in college sports now, I double checked. I was like, he is done now, right? I am gonna say this is
He was only a fifth year.
I know. I just had to double check because I was like, knowing me, I'll give this award and be like, oh, it was an unceremonious end, but what a final year, and there'd be somebody that would come out and be like, actually, he's gonna be back next year, which would be awesome. I would love for him to scrounge up an extra year of eligibility, but I don't know that's gonna happen. But yeah, what a run for Lance Jones for Purdue. He was a big difference maker, and he was kind of a shot in the arm they needed as far as the differences between what they were able to do last year. Obviously, the disappointing end of the season last year, and then of course being able to make the run that they did this year.
Yeah, what's crazy about Lance Jones in today's transfer era of NIL, he came to Purdue, wasn't looking for any NIL deals. He just wanted the opportunity to play on the stage that he got to play on last night. And that's all he wanted. He wanted an opportunity to play high-level basketball. He got that chance. I mean, I tell you, as a Purdue fan, when the transfer portal was flying around and we knew we needed another ball handler, it's like, oh, Lance Jones. Okay. This is going to be a good little guy to come off the bench and, bring a shot in the arm when needed. Who knew? Who knew that he would be starting and be such an integral part of the team? I mean, it was a great surprise. And the fact that he just fit right in with the chemistry of that team was unbelievable. That's exactly what you want to find. And that's what the transfer portal should really be about. Finding guys like that just love the game and want an opportunity to play at that next level. So cool for him.
And that's what people don't like, because I saw a post today about, of course, all the Indiana State guys leaving. And, of course, you have, the old heads that you see on all the social medias, like, this is what's wrong with college sports. It's like, that's what a lot of people don't understand. They just see something they don't like and they automatically go towards NIL because they don't like the fact that players are being compensated for what the talent and the money that they bring to the universities. And it's like, no, there's a lot more to it than that. You have opportunities, like you said, with Lance Jones. He didn't care about NIL. He just wants the opportunity to play for, a championship level program. Talked about all the Indiana State guys. They're not leaving to chase money. They're leaving because their coach left and they want to go with them. So, there's a lot more to all of that than what a lot of people think. And so it really is cool to see stories like that where, I just want to play for a great team, and guess what? Propelled them to their first national championship game in
And guess what?
forever.
It landed him NIL money.
Right,
I
for
can
sure.
guarantee you that he didn't get. It's not like he got nothing.
Right.
But he wasn't looking for anything. That's the point of the story. For me, oh man, giving an award, it's either the comeback kid with Braden Smith, how he had a turnaround game after just having the worst game of the season, or maybe even his career, in the national semifinal against NC State. 5 turnovers, 2 back-to-back backcourt violations are just totally uncharacteristic. He did bounce back, and he was like one of the only other Purdue players to, find scoring ability in last night's game, or the national championship game against UConn. But that's just Braden Smith for you. He's his own worst critic, and anytime he has a bad performance, he's going to grow from that. He's going to push himself harder from that. And you saw that. He came out in the second half, even against NC State. He played much better. Apparently it's because he changed his shoes. First half, he was wearing Devin Booker's shoes that Devin Booker gave to every team at the Final Four. And he doesn't usually wear Books, but instead, so Lance Jones told him, you need to switch back to your Kobe's that you always wear. He switched back to the Kobe's, and he hit a clutch 3 to basically put the game away in the semifinal. And he kept wearing the Kobe's, and he had a much better game against UConn. It wasn't a great game for him, but it was much, much better. The other one, I guess you would have to, I would consider as well, is the white boys can't jump to Cam Heidi. I mean, it's just, yeah, that dunk was if Purdue had won the national championship, I haven't seen one shining moment. I will admit it. I haven't seen it. It stings a little too much. I don't want to see the end, but I don't know if that dunk made the highlight reel for one shining moment. But had Purdue won, I guarantee you that would have been one of the highlights in that.
Oh, yeah. I'll
But
keep it a buck with you. I've seen One Shining Moment, and I can't remember if it's in there or not. I think I watched One Shining Moment for nostalgia's sake. I don't know. They've messed with the song a little bit. I'm not sitting here being, old man yells at cloud. Don't worry about it. But I think they messed with the song a little bit because I was like, this doesn't go the way that it normally goes. But I was like, I mean, it's cool. I enjoy it, but it's not like, I think a lot of the reason I watch it is because like I always watch it and I think it's cool, but I was like, that's not like it's memorable and I'm like, oh yeah, it was a great 3 minutes of video. Like, no, it's whatever. It's One Shining Moment. It's cool. But yeah, no, I don't remember if it's in there or not.
yeah, old man yells at cloud. My dad had one of those national semifinal game. We're watching it all together. And there's a Purdue fan, there's a student in the student section just going nuts, having a great time. And my dad goes, oh, sit down, kid. I'm like, we all look at him like, what? It sounded like that. Get off my lawn,
Yeah.
you young whippersnapper. Like, oh boy, old man yells at cloud for sure. But yeah, it's got to go. It's either the white boy can't jump to Cam Heidi or the comeback kid to Braden Smith for his turnaround from the first half in the NC State game.
Hey, look, it's our podcast. You can give out both. I'm good with that.
Okay.
But I'm trying to think. I was trying to think a correlation. What's that? What's the movie called?
Or it could be he's not just tall to Zach Edey, who in the NC State game scored his typical 20 points and only shot 2 free throws the entire game.
You're or the old man yells at cloud award to Dan Hurley for yelling at Zach Edey.
Yeah.
But no, like I'm trying to think. What's that movie where the kid gets like Michael Jordan's shoes and
like
becomes
Mike.
Like Mike? Yeah, that was easy. Why couldn't I think of that? That's what
Lil Bow Wow.
So maybe that's his name. I was trying to think of his name. So yeah, I was like, maybe that with the shoes one. I was like, I was trying to think of like what your word could be called out of that name, like something similar to that, because that's shoe related. But yeah, no,
The spirit of the Mamba.
yeah, yeah, there you go. I like it. But yeah, no, yeah, the Heidi dunk was insane. So I'm good with both of those awards there. So as we wrap up the Purdue conversation here, and the Purdue season, I thought we would do that with a hot or cold take here. If you're new to the show, we ask a question every now and again where where we not really ask a question. We say a statement and tell you whether or not that statement we think is a hot take or a cold take. And so the hot or cold take for Purdue and their championship run to the championship game. The statement is this: the hot or cold statement is this: a player from this year's Purdue team will make another Final Four. And unfortunately, I think that's a cold take. No Edie or Lance Jones next year. I know Mason Gillis has technically some eligibility left. I don't think he'll be back.
I keep hearing like people in their way too early rankings keep mentioning Mason Gillis coming back, but I will say from what I have heard at the beginning of the season, he's not coming back. He's
Right.
done playing college basketball. He wants to move on in life.
The one or two articles I saw was like not optimistic. It was just like technically he could. So I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, he has a COVID year, but I don't think he's using it. Like I said, Purdue's already signed one over. So they don't technically have the room.
Right.
If he wanted to go play, he would probably have to go transfer to Oklahoma State and play for Steve Lutz.
But especially with no Edie, the identity of this team will undoubtedly have to change at least a little bit. That's not to say that Matt Painter is incapable of changing it quickly and effectively, but I mean it'll still be a challenge. The Big Ten gets tougher next season with the addition of Oregon, Washington, UCLA, and USC. So that's just going to be more hurdles to go through, more teams to get over. I mean, I know that of those four teams, only Oregon was in the NCAA tournament and they were a 10 seed, but that's still, I mean, Washington can be a decent program. UCLA, obviously, another IU type blue blood, but hasn't won in a while type program.
Sleep on USC with Eric Musselman.
Right. And so, you're going to have all that to kind of hurdle. And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. Obviously, we've relished in what a great season Purdue has had. But even if you put Braden Smith and or Fletcher Lawyer in the Robbie Hummel or Carson Edwards tier of like great Purdue players, I mean, this was still just Purdue's second Final Four in 40 years. And they've only had, I believe, 2 Elite Eight appearances in the last 24 years. So that said, it's just tough to get there. And that's nothing against this team. That's not saying that they absolutely, without a doubt, cannot get back. It's just going to be super tough. Just like, hey, we've seen, teams that Purdue's had that's, equally or at least on the same level of this team as far as talent and being able to be this good. And they haven't even sniffed the final weekend of the NCAA season. So, it's just there's a lot of things kind of working against them. Like I said, doesn't mean it will never happen again ever. I just think to expect it to happen again in a short window with the conference getting tougher, with the identity of this team changing, I think this will be if they had made it, maybe if Edie maybe had one more season or maybe more of this team was coming back next year, I think I would be on board. But I think there's going to be just a little bit. There's not a lot of turnover happening next year, but I think there will just be enough to where it's going to be challenging to get back there in the next couple of years.
So this is actually Purdue's third Elite Eight in the last 24 years. They made the Elite Eight in 2000, lost to Wisconsin.
Okay, I think I think I saw 2000 and then just didn't count it. So third. Yeah, you're right.
So I was talking to you about this before we hit record. This is a hot take. Most likely not next year. Who knows? You can never say never. A lot of people thought this year, UConn wasn't going into the season. UConn, I don't know if they'll make a run back to the Final Four. We'll see. But you just never know. 2026 is the next year circled for a Purdue team to be potentially special. At that point, you will have Trey Kaufman-Renn will be a senior, a redshirt senior. You'll have seniors in Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer. This incoming then Cam Heidi and Miles Colvin are going to be juniors. Will Berg, who is the 7'2" center sitting on the bench right now, he will be a junior. And you will have the incoming freshmen who are extremely talented. They will be in their sophomore year. And we've seen how players can make a jump from freshman year to sophomore year in Matt Painter's system. That is a year that Purdue could have another special team on their hands. Not as special as this year. I mean, this was a different team. This was a totally different team. Of course, we never knew Zach Edey was going to be a 2-time National Player of the Year, so you can never count anybody out. But there's not another not another generational type player walking through the doors. Obviously, yes, that's very hard to replace. But Purdue is still bringing in. They'll have 2 guys on the roster next year over 7 foot, yet again, that are a little bit more perimeter style 7-footers. But I think you will see players on this were on this year's roster, barring any transfers or anything like that, that will see another Final Four. I think it's a hot take. I think 2026, Purdue is knocking on the door of the Final Four yet again. If not next year, I mean, look, people are already putting them as a preseason top 10, top 5 team. And right now, there's no other Big Ten team that's being considered as a top 10 team. So, I mean, a lot of people are looking at this run that Purdue made as a potential starting point of a potential conference dominance, like we saw starting in 2000 from Michigan State, how the Big Ten ran through East Lansing. It's like, well, it looks like, and they didn't win it every year, but they won it a lot. And if you wanted to win the Big Ten, you had to beat Michigan State to do that. So I think Purdue is in a good spot, especially with the league expanding. If you can come out on top of your conference, you're most likely looking at a 1 or a 2 seed if you're coming out on top of the Big Ten. So I think you will see Purdue back in a Final Four in the next couple of years, and I believe it'll be the senior year of Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer.
I really wish I had gone back and looked, because this is so unlike me not to do this. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I'm surprised I didn't do it. Looking at like what has happened to like the losers of the national championship, like how, like what's been the window for them, because I think that would have been a good nugget to have as well.
I think Gonzaga skews it a little bit.
No, I mean, it didn't. Not like, just as far as like the next year, but just like the next like 2 years. Like, so if like,
I mean, Villanova is a prime example.
I don't think they lost. I think they won in 2016 and then 2018.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But I think they made it to the Final Four and they lost in the Final Four.
Yeah.
But they didn't make it to the championship game.
Right.
Another year. So I could see Matt Painter having a run over the next few years similar to Jay Wright.
Oh, believe me, I think
very similar coaches, and
that's why
the reason why Jay Wright was pulling for UConn last night was, 1, he's smart, he knows, but 2, it's a Big East affiliate. Like he's a Big East guy, but otherwise Jay Wright was just singing the praises of Matt Painter and Purdue pretty much the entire tournament when everybody else was like, they lost to FDU last year. Well, different year, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I mean, I take those like preseason, like way too early things with a grain of salt. You said like Purdue was highly regarded. Now, granted, if I was on the hot take side of this, I'd be 100% using it too. But also, I mean, you kind of have to have them in there because you know that you would have guys like us being like, how can you not put Purdue up there? They just lost the national championship. You can't have them.
Well, I'll be honest. I was kind of surprised people had them up in there.
Yeah.
Top 25, yeah, definitely. But I thought because Zach Edey leaving, they would pull Purdue right down the ranks. But I think because of the amount that is returning, it helps. I mean, I've seen them as they were as high as number 2, which way too high,
Yeah,
way too high. I saw them as low as 12. The consensus was probably about six to eight, is where a lot of people had them marked in at, which, I mean, look, this team was, I mean, a lot of people are also now considering Braden Smith as one of the top point guards in the country. And that's huge. If you have an elite level point guard, you can go far. I mean, look, last time Purdue got close to making the Final Four, they had Carson Edwards essentially running the point. Now, Braden Smith's not Carson Edwards. He's not just going to pull up from anywhere and drain it, but still, he's got that same kind of mentality.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. Hopefully, Purdue can get back sooner than 40 years. That's why I narrowed it down. I didn't put do you think? Because I almost made it like, do you think it'll be like they'll make another one in Matt Painter's tenure? I was like, that seems too mean. I think they can get there again in Matt Painter's tenure with Purdue. So we'll see. Again, an amazing season by Purdue. And hopefully, this isn't the last time I don't think it will be, but hopefully this isn't the last time we're doing a recap of a Purdue national championship game. But speaking of Final Fours, we're going to shift gears over to the women's Final Four. We're going to talk a little bit about that. In case you missed it, I don't see how you could have, because it was record-setting viewership. The women's Final Four, you had number 1 South Carolina. They beat number 3 NC State 78-59. Camila Cordoso had 22 points and 11 rebounds. Then the nightcap, number 1 Iowa over number 3 UConn. In that one, Caitlin Clark scores 21 points, grabs 9 rebounds. Of course, the talk of it was the screen at the end of the game, the offensive foul for UConn. That basically seals the win for Iowa. And then that sets up the national championship game between number 1 South Carolina and number 1 Iowa. Number 1 South Carolina wins 87-75. Tessa Johnson, a freshman, had 19 points and was the leading scorer off the bench. Caitlin Clark had 30 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists in the loss. Her final game for the Hawkeyes. So I saw the question kind of swirling around a little bit, and I thought it might be fun to tackle it here. Hot or cold question from the women's Final Four and the women's NCAA tournament is this. Hot or cold, Caitlin Clark is the best NCAA women's basketball player of all time, even with no title. I looked at a few different lists of the GOATs of women's college basketball. At the top of those lists, I frequently saw names like Breanna Stewart from UConn, 4-time national champion, 4-time NCAA tournament most outstanding player, 3-time AAC player of the year, 3-time first-team All-American. I saw Candace Parker from Tennessee, 2-time national champion, 2-time NCAA tournament most outstanding player, a Naismith College Player of the Year award to her name. Diana Taurasi, out of UConn, 3-time national champion, 2-time NCAA tournament most outstanding player of the year, 2-time Big East player of the year. I saw Cheryl Miller from USC, 2-time NCAA tournament champion, 3-time Naismith player of the year. It's all Brittany Griner from Baylor, NCAA tournament champion in 2012, the only player on this list that does not have multiple titles. NCAA Final Four most outstanding player, 3-time Big 12 player of the year, 2-time first team All-American. When you look at Clark's accolades to kind of stack against them, despite not having any titles, Clark is a 4-time first team All-American, a 3-time Big 10 player of the year, a 3-time NCAA season scoring leader, a 3-time NCAA season assist leader, a 2-time Naismith College Player of the Year award winner. Caitlin Clark is the leading scorer all time across men's and women's basketball. Top 25, looking at the other top 25 scorers in women's basketball from this list, Brittany Griner is 6th, Cheryl Miller is 14th. The other people I mentioned, Taurasi and Breanna Stewart, aren't on that list. Neither are some of the other names that I saw. I just kind of summarized the list. There are other names on there, obviously, but Still, no other players I saw were on that list of like top 25 scorers. So Clark is not short on accolades. She's just missing the national title. But what makes this a hot take for me is how Caitlin Clark captivated the sports world over her time in Iowa City. Iowa held the crossover at Kinnick earlier this season, where the Hawkeyes set the single game attendance record for women's basketball. From the Elite Eight on, Iowa drew 12.3 million viewers. Yeah, never mind. I wrote that weird. From the Elite Eight on, Iowa drew 12.3 million viewers in their 2023 championship game rematch versus LSU. 14.2 million viewers versus UConn. 18.7 million viewers in their championship game loss to South Carolina. Each one of those games broke the viewership record for women's college basketball set by the previous game. Iowa, South Carolina was the most watched basketball game since 2019. You can say it's not all Caitlin Clark, but Sunday's viewership was up 285% from 2022 when it was South Carolina versus UConn. So obviously no Caitlin Clark in that game. Also, as far as my research indicates, Clark will be Iowa's first player selected in the first round, and certainly their first player picked first overall in the WNBA draft. When Breanna Stewart was selected, two of her UConn teammates were selected also with the first three picks of the 2016 WNBA draft. So it was Breanna Stewart and two of her teammates that went with the first three picks of that draft. Candace Parker and one of her teammates were both selected in the first round of the 2008 WNBA draft. So obviously, those players are good, not taking anything away from Parker or Stewart, but obviously, the players that they had around them are different from what Caitlin Clark had around her at Iowa. Not saying Iowa doesn't have a great program, doesn't have great athletes outside of Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark wasn't even the leading scorer in the game against UConn. But I'm just saying that, you had some of the players on that list with Caitlin Clark that are considered the greatest of all time had other WNBA superstars around them, as opposed to Caitlin Clark, who I don't know that anyone else is from her team is going to be drafted in the first round or maybe even at all in the WNBA draft. The impact that Caitlin Clark has had on Iowa basketball and women's basketball in general is what makes her the GOAT for me, even with no title. I know it's kind of odd to consider, a GOAT that doesn't have a title. Maybe the equivalent, here we can relate to is, Hoosiers is, Peyton Manning in college football, what he was able to do at Tennessee, never won a national championship, but hey, he still had an amazing, he was still an amazing quarterback. Obviously a little bit different, but still, doesn't have the title, but it's the impact that Caitlin Clark was able to have was just incredible. So that's why she's the GOAT for me.
Yeah. This is a tough question because I think she is the greatest of all time to have not won a national championship.
Hands down, that's not even without a question. She's the best to never win it.
Gosh, I agree with you. This is a hot take, but what she has meant to women's basketball is the same thing, is very similar to what Cheryl Miller meant to women's basketball at that time. I think Caitlin Clark has helped definitely lead the exposure of women's basketball and has, in my opinion, you will see a growth within women's basketball as far as like younger girls getting involved in basketball. I mean, my 5-year-old, she constantly has a basketball in her hand, just dribbling it around the house. She watched a little bit, but as much as a 5-year-old, you can grab their attention of watching a basketball game. But I feel like just me talking about it more because of Caitlin Clark has gained her interest in it, so what she has meant to the future of the sport definitely makes her the GOAT. Also, just the fact that she is the all-time scoring leader across men's and women's. That is impressive. I mean, yes, there's a 3-point line now. Okay. I get it. But for me, the biggest stat that stands out the most is, let me go back through here. Let me check my notes. Is her being a 3-time NCAA season leader in assists. Everybody wants to look at the points. Well, she's a ball hog because now she just jacks it up every time she goes down the court. No, she does not. That is far, far, far from the truth. That is showing somebody that has never watched a second of Caitlin Clark. To lead the NCAA for 3 years in assists while also leading in scoring, that says a lot. She made everyone around her better and made fans at a time, I believe, when women's basketball really needed a boost. There was a lot of you go back to 2021 when the tournaments were in a bubble and the weight room incident, where the comparison between the men's weight room and the women's weight room. Just a lot of everybody trying to play catch up with women's basketball to get it back on equal playing field with the men not as far as talent goes or skill level goes. I'm not going to go there. I'm not making that argument. I'm saying as far as investment goes or experience, like the overall student athlete experience goes. And no matter what, it was just this shadow. It was a cloud hanging over that sport. And then Caitlin Clark comes in at a time where ESPN is making some different moves and adjustments. Hey, let's try playing the national championship at 3:00 on a Sunday afternoon on ABC. You and I talked about this prior to recording. Yes, the women's national championship had a higher viewership number than the men's national championship. That's because of Caitlin Clark, a lot of it. But in B, it's timing. 3:00 on a Sunday compared to 9:30 at night on a Monday. Big difference. You're going to get more people to be able to tune in. And then C, the women's championship was on network television. And the men's championship was behind a paywall, essentially. You either had to stream it, you had to have cable, you had to have HBO Max, any of those. So you made it more difficult to access for people. I think if you played it at 7:00 men's, different. Okay, I'm getting off topic. Yes, Caitlin Clark is the GOAT when it comes to women's basketball, not just because of the accolades on the court, but what she has meant for the sport overall. And it's only going to continue to grow.
Yeah.
It's going to be a huge, huge impact for the city of Indianapolis.
Oh yeah, for sure, and we'll get more to Caitlin Clark's impact potentially on Indianapolis here in a little bit. But you're absolutely right. I mean, maybe more on the whole when championship games were held on later on
Yes.
on a future podcast, because I think it was a little ridiculous.
The podcast of old men yell at clouds.
Exactly, because I'm completely with you. The fact that it was on now, like I said, told you off air as well. I lucked out in the fact that I got to go into work later today, or else I would have, I probably wouldn't have watched the whole thing, especially when it was getting out of hand later on in the game. But yeah, ridiculous what time they choose to start that now. But I also, going back to, good segue to go back to talking about the Purdue game here. Kind of wanted to do kind of a state of the state here in terms of basketball, because we had a lot of awesome storylines for this year in college, especially, not just in college basketball, but across the whole entire state in terms of even pro. I mean, the Pacers are back in the playoffs solidly. They're a 6th seed. You had Indiana State in the NIT finals. You had Purdue making their run. You have all this stuff happening around the state. Even in high school, 4 teams in men's high school basketball, boys basketball, won their first title in program history, which is pretty incredible. So a lot of great things to talk about there. And so my question is this: did we just witness the best season of basketball this state has ever seen? The 2023-2024 season, will it go down as the best all time? Because I think it does. I was kind of looking through some of the years that have been good for basketball here in the state. The last time there was a men's college team in the national championship game was 2002. The Pacers were 8th in the Eastern Conference. Ball State was bounced from the NIT quarterfinals, and the Fever went to the WNBA playoffs for the first time. The Indiana Fever won the WNBA championship in 2012. That year, the Pacers lost in the NBA Eastern Conference semifinals. Indiana had 3 teams in the NCAA tournament. IU was the 4th seed. They lost in the Sweet 16. Notre Dame was the 7th seed. They lost in the round of 64. Purdue was the 10th seed. They lost in the round of 32 to Kansas. The Pacers made back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals appearances in 2013 and 2014. In 2013, IU made the NCAA tournament as a number 1 seed, lost in the Sweet 16. Butler made the tournament as a number 6 seed, lost in the round of 32. Notre Dame made the tournament as a number 7 seed, lost in the round of 64. The Indiana Fever finished 16 and 18. In 2014, IU and Purdue finished in the bottom half of the Big Ten. No Indiana teams made the NCAA tournament, which is wild to think about. The Fever also finished 16 and 18 that year as well. And then we've seen some women's college basketball championships. 1999, Purdue won it all. The Pacers lost in the NBA Eastern Conference Finals to the Knicks. Indiana had 4 teams in the NCAA tournament. Number 10 Purdue lost in 10th seeded Purdue lost in the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament. Number 6 IU lost in the round of 32. 11 Evansville was an 11 seed. Valpo was a 15 seed. They lost in the round of 32. Butler lost in the quarterfinals of the NIT. The Fever didn't exist, so the Fever couldn't really do much of anything to put themselves on the map that year. In 2001, Notre Dame won the national championship. The Pacers lost in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs to the 76ers. In the 2001 NCAA tournament, number 6 Notre Dame lost in the round of 32. Number 10 Butler lost in the round of 32. Number 13 Indiana State lost in the round of 32, and number 4 IU lost in the round of 64. Purdue lost in the NIT quarterfinals. The Fever finished 10 and 22. And then in 2018, Notre Dame won the national championship. The Pacers lost in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs to the Cavs. And number 2 Purdue lost in the Sweet 16 that year in the NCAA tournament. And number 10 Butler lost in the round of 32. The Fever finished 6 and 28. So I think 2002 was the closest to what we had this year. A men's team in the national championship, a deep mid-major run from a mid-major, run by a mid-major team in the NIT. Ball State that year, Indiana State this year. The Pacers in the playoffs, and a notable season for the Fever. 2001 is close. Is a close rival to this year with a women's natty, 4 men's tournament teams, and a deep NIT run. 1999 is kind of similar to that. But I think for Purdue to be in the national championship, Indiana State to be in the NIT final, the Pacers with an in-season tournament runner-up finish, and a playoff series on the horizon, the Fever about to land a generational talent in this year's draft. I mean, I think this year is going to go down as maybe one of the all-time greats. I think it is going to be considered the all-time best year for basketball in the state of Indiana.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a hot take, just because here we are at here we are almost middle of April, and we're talking basketball on this show. We're not just talking, normally we wouldn't be recapping the men's college basketball national championship, but with Purdue playing
if Purdue didn't make it this far, this probably would have been a week off, or we would have already been talking about draft stuff. We would have been doing something. So
then with the buzz surrounding the Indiana Fever right now, and then the amazing run put together by Indiana State, I don't know if I would call it an amazing run, because that's a team that, had NC State not gone on their amazing run, would have been in the NCAA tournament. I don't know how far they would have advanced, but they would have been in the NCAA tournament. Um, but the fact, just the hype that got built up, and it it honestly, it felt like March Madness again in the state of Indiana. When you have a high major team that's doing well, and everybody, people are pulling for them, but then there's that mid-major team that's making a run that everybody gets behind. It used to be Butler. Butler was always that team, that mid-major team that you always got behind come March, and that was Indiana State this year. We all became a fan of Terre Haute, Indiana, and the fact that then it got played, the NIT championship was played at Hinkle Fieldhouse, was just, it made it even cooler. So yeah, I agree. This is definitely a hot take. We're talking basketball. We're talking Pacers basketball. We're talking Indiana Fever. We're talking men's college basketball. It's, totally impressive.
Yeah, I mean, because I was looking at some of those other years that we had, like that Indiana had like multiple teams in the NCAA tournament, like that one year that like Evansville was an 11 seed, and I was like, even then though, I mean, a lot of those years it was like lost in the round of 64, like didn't know what nobody making it out of the first weekend of the tournament, and so to have like one team go all the way to the national championship, have another, basically two Indiana teams played for a basketball championship. Three, if you want to throw Indiana, the Pacers, the in-season tournament. So we've watched, of course, 0-3, but at the same, we've seen that happen. So yeah, on a great scale, it's been a lot of, basketball is on the up and up. I mean, obviously, it's Indiana. Basketball is always on the up and up, but it's even more so on the up and up from a year like this year, which begs the question: are we entering a golden era of basketball in the state of Indiana? For me, I think as far as the pro game is concerned, I think that it is on the way up. I'm just not entirely sure about the college landscape. The Pacers core is looking up. You have the face in the franchise of the franchise and Tyrese Halliburton with a young core around him. The Pacers are win now mode for the first time in a while. The Fever are about to land Caitlin Clark, a generational talent that could put them back in line with the top teams in the WNBA. But as far as college goes, who knows? Zach Edey is leaving the program at Purdue. That program obviously will still be strong, but who knows? We talked about it earlier. Who knows when the next time we're going to see another Final Four? I mean, obviously you're more optimistic about it than I am, but who knows? IU underperformed this season, finishing 500 in the Big Ten. Notre Dame hurdled their low expectations and were better than we thought they would be, but they also finished 7 games under 500. Indiana State looked to be the first mid-major team to make the tournament from Indiana in years. They go to the NIT. Their coach is no longer there, and a lot of the star players from that team went with them. So a lot of uncertainty at the collegiate level. It doesn't mean that it's nothing, like we're going to see no teams make the tournament from Indiana next year. It's just I'm not as confident that we're going to see kind of I mean, obviously it's 2 teams in pro as opposed to all the teams that you have in college from the state, but I don't know that we're going to see kind of the renaissance at the or at the college level that we're about to see at the pro level.
I think we are across the board. I think now that Purdue's gotten that monkey off their back, they will be I'm not going to say a perennial contender for a national championship, but a perennial Final Four contender. Because now you have young players on that team that know what it takes to get to the Final Four. They know what it takes to play for a national championship, and they've witnessed firsthand what it takes to win a national championship. So I think we are heading into a golden era of basketball. We're getting back to. I think we're gonna get back to an era where it feels like 90s Indiana basketball across the board. I can't speak on how outside of Purdue, I can't really say because the IU program is kind of a toss up right now. Butler, you're not really sure where they're at. Notre Dame is going to get better. Trust me, Notre Dame is getting there. They just have, it takes time, patience. Indiana State, that's a tough hit that they're taking. But on the women's side of things, the Purdue women's team is getting better. IU has asserted themselves as one of the top programs in the Big Ten and a top 10 program in the country. And then in the pros, it's awesome. You have a young superstar superstar in the making, and Tyrese Halliburton for the Pacers. The right moves are being made there to make them competitive. And on the women's side, the future is so bright for the Fever with, the potential addition of Caitlin Clark. Can't say yes because they haven't drafted her yet, but let's be honest, Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston. I mean, you can't ask for two better individuals to be on that roster, just as ambassadors for the sport, and then for them to be playing in a state that knows basketball so well, that we appreciate basketball. It's exciting times. Like, look, it's very exciting. Hey, who knows? The Fever could come out next year with Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark and completely suck and land the number 1 overall pick again and potentially go out and draft Paige Beckers. So then you could be like, well, the Fever are probably going to win every WNBA championship for the foreseeable future. But even with Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston, it's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of fun. I don't know how many championships are going to be won in the state of Indiana collegiately through the pros. It could be none. But look, in the 90s, there wasn't really any other than the 1999 Purdue women's basketball team.
Right.
So it was still fun, though. The 90s were still fun.
Yeah.
So I think we're headed right back there.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned what the Fever might look like next year, and that brings me to what the final hot or cold question of the night will be, and we'll end on this. Which you said, obviously, big asterisk. The Fever have not drafted Caitlin Clark yet, but with Caitlin Clark, hot or cold, with Caitlin Clark likely going to Indiana at number 1, if that were to happen, the Fever will pass the Pacers as the most popular pro team in the state. It's a little bit of a difficult question because obviously they play at different times. So obviously, it's going to be tough for, obviously the Fever will be grabbing headlines because they'll be actually playing and the Pacers won't be. But I think that this is a hot take. When we look at this, if when the Fever ultimately draft Caitlin Clark, it's going to obviously have a big impact. I looked at when the Fever won the WNBA Finals in 2012. They were 6th in the league in attendance, averaging about 7,600 fans per game. The following season, they jumped to 4th in the league in attendance, averaging nearly 8,200 fans per game. And that's going to be, this is the type of thing. It's obviously landing a generational talent isn't the same as winning a championship, but it's got, it's going to create buzz like winning a championship does. The Iowa Hawkeyes ranked 2nd nationally in attendance 2 seasons ago, averaging over 1,100 fans per game. This season, they sold out every game on the road, and all but 2 of Iowa's regular season games were sellouts or broke some sort of attendance record. The Pacers have been 29th in attendance the last 2 seasons, though that number is in the 15 to 16,000 fan range. So obviously, that number is still higher than the numbers that I just read off for Iowa and for the Fever in their championship year. But so I'm not saying that, they're going to average more than what the Pacers are going to average. I'm not saying that. But who knows? I wouldn't rule out a sellout opening night. I think that is definitely on the table. The last time the Pacers had a pick this high in the NBA draft, like close to round 1, pick 1, 1988. They selected Rick Smits with the 2nd overall pick. That
worked out pretty well.
Hey, look, yeah, no, undoubtedly so. But, with Caitlin Clark, I'm looking, I look at Caitlin Clark and I see a ceiling of let's say, Steph Curry, or dare I say Reggie Miller, just because of the shooting ability. And because, and it's been a long time since the Pacers added a player like that to their team. So I think at least at the start of the Caitlin Clark run, and maybe a few times here and there, depending on what the Pacers do with their rebuild, I think the Fever will be the more popular pro team in the state. I feel more confident in the sustained success of the Fever than I do with Clark, than I do with the Pacers and Halliburton. Not necessarily because I don't have faith in Halliburton and the Pacers. I've just seen the Pacers have what looked to be their future, and then it just kind of goes away. So we'll see. Obviously, it looks a little bit more stable than it has in years past. But at the same time, who knows? But I think it's going to be really fun. Heck, you said the Pacers, getting a high pick again next year. I think what would be really cool. Yeah, that's what I mean. The Fever getting a high pick again next year. I think it would be interesting if the if the Fever, we're talking about the Fever, Craig. If the Fever were to trade whatever draft capital they need to trade to move to get another pick in the top 5. Not that another team would agree to this, but I'm, as someone who has, who can just throw whatever trade, scenario he wants out there. The Fever should try to trade back up into the top 5 and grab Angel Reese, to have Reese and Caitlin Clark on the same team. Hey, look,
I know,
look,
it would sell, but
no. And plus, look, when you look at the Jordan Bulls, you need your Dennis Rodman. You need your tough defender, man. You need that person that's gonna, not be afraid to throw down. So I mean,
why you trade back up and take Camila Cardosa?
Okay, I'm good with that too. She
6'7"
was amazing over during the Final Four. But yeah, no,
you gotta take Camila Cardosa.
But yeah, no, I think it's a hot take for sure.
Oh yeah, I think it is because one, the Fever are already seeing the benefits as they are rolling out. Like, typically, season tickets are available. Okay, now you can buy single game tickets. All the games are available. Okay, they're having special pre-sales where they are rolling out 2 games at a time each day prior to the free-for-all. And these things are going fast, like super fast. I think, looking at the tickets, they're selling them up in the upper balcony. Typically, the Fever don't open up the full game bridge. They don't typically put people up in the upper balcony or all around the upper balcony, at least. I think this year it's going to be different. Is it going to be sustainable year over year, that's going to be the common theme? I don't think so, but who knows? It's the Caitlin Clark effect. It truly is. And the city of Indianapolis is going to reap the benefits of that immensely. And like I said earlier, look, I've gotten to experience watching both Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston in person, both on the court and off the court. And you could not ask for 2 better individuals on the court and off the court to represent this city. You really can't. You can't ask for 2 better individuals than that. So, hey, I'm looking to try to get tickets.
Yeah, I know somebody who maybe not the literal second, but as soon as the Fever landed the number 1 overall pick, they got season tickets. They were like, yeah, we know it's undoubtedly going to be Clark. So I don't know if she had already declared yet. So that would have been bad if she didn't.
She declared a few weeks prior to season tickets going on sale.
Okay, so I was like, hopefully I don't know if they were that bold as to do that, but right. But yeah, so I mean, obviously, like, I don't know that because once it's like year 3, year 4, it just depends on how it'll become more or less of a Caitlin Clark thing over time than it will be. It'll become more of a, are they winning championships? How successful that team is. Which,
Yes.
I mean, undoubtedly it'll be that. But I think, yeah, for definitely season 1, and then, you know, it'll just depend after that on what they do. It'll be a huge success. Like I said, I think there's gonna be at least one sellout on opening night. I don't know how it'll be, and probably easily through the first few months, I'm sure. So
I think the Fever will break their own attendance records.
yeah,
That's a hot take.
and I don't
really.
and I don't know.
Really.
I need to look more into this too, because I was like, I don't know what like they would have to do to like have like the all time attendance like record, because I know the Las Vegas Aces have right now the attendance, like they were the tops in attendance.
I think it also depends on arena size.
Right, but I mean, they all roughly play in NBA arenas, right? So
but
I know they're different sizes and they have different capacities, but I mean, I don't know. But yeah, I would be interested to see if they would have a shot at, maybe, especially year 1, if they would have a shot at like beating that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
First game, put it at Lucas Oil, see what happens. Let's go. Hey, they had the crossover at Kinnick. I'm just saying, let's see what we can do.
That's true.
Let's try to break some attendance records, because I think we can do it.
Iowa fans, though, they do love their sporting events to be played in Kinnick, whether it's women's basketball or Iowa wrestling versus Oklahoma State wrestling, who set the record for the highest number of attendees for a wrestling match. So, I mean, Iowa just knows how to do it outside.
True. They're like, you know what? Just hold it at Kinnick. We'll be fine. Tear everything else down. We'll figure out how to do it at Kinnick year round. Put a dome on it. But yeah, that'll do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course podcast. It'll be interesting to see what basketball will look like here around the state. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a lot of fun. We'll see what the Fever can do, and more Fever content incoming potentially on down the road. But that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course podcast. Thank you guys all for hanging out. Remember that you can follow us on X at 3C Media Sports. Finally got the new logo. You can see that up in the corner. Awesome. I'm up with the times. 3C Media on Facebook as well. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're not already there. Subscribe, ring the bell. Also go over to TikTok. Follow us over there. And then if you're already on the YouTube side of things, hop on over to the podcast apps. You can listen to us on the go. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard, you can hear the Crash Course podcast. You can find me at Crash Course FM on Twitter. B. Scott, where can they find you?
Find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
Next week, it is finally time. B. Scott's favorite time of the year. It is the NFL draft. We'll be starting off with some Colts draft conversation, talking about their draft. And of course, the following week, we'll be talking NFL draft as a whole. So a lot of NFL draft coming your way. But until then, have a good week, everybody.